So Ian, tell us who you are and what you do.
I am a lecturer at Stanford University in the School of Earth Sciences and the Earth Systems program, and I teach courses on climate change, renewable energy, and sustainable information technology. And beyond that, I also am the CEO of a startup called OroEco that tracks your personal impacts on climate change and turns that into a social game.
Tell us about the course that you lecture on at Stanford.
I lecture for several courses at Stanford. The one that I'm the most excited about is one I created about 5 years ago with the Dean of the School of Earth Sciences at Stanford, Pam Matson. And we call it, it's got a long, weighty name, Social and Environmental Trade-offs in Climate Decision Making. And the course is all about how should we look at all the different policy and technology solutions to climate change and weigh the different social and environmental trade-offs that go along with those decisions. And information technology is a big piece of the picture.
In this particular course, what are the key messages you want your students to take away?
I'd say the first one is just the enormity of the climate change problem. Then diving into the solutions that are out there is what we dig into. And a constant theme is every solution, be it a policy solution or a technology solution, has trade-offs associated with it. And there are some great quantitative tools that are really consistently improving to measure these trade-offs and weigh them against each other. And a big piece that we come to more around the end of the course is how much information technology is not just allowing us to quantify these trade-offs, but just as importantly, really allow us to communicate these trade-offs to the business world, to the general public, to government. And we get into the importance of storytelling, moving beyond kind of cold, hard data and talking about climate change as this nebulous global issue to really figuring out the stories that are personal.
Tell us how you use these digital tools to enhance the storytelling and the communication that you do around the challenges of global warming and everything, climate change.
The Stanford University course, it definitely is diving into just initially all the data that's out there and the tools that has helped collect data in terms of real quantitative sustainability. So there's that initial piece, information technology as it relates to quantitative sustainability, how climate is changing, and also how solutions can help respond to those changes. And then the piece that we move to later in the course is how information technology is this incredible communications tool. The fact that we have mobile phones as supercomputers, and there are now more of them than there are people on the planet at this point, and the ubiquity of Facebook and social networks and how to use essentially peer pressure, peer collaboration, competition, and just sharing of information to really drive change.
How do you feel that the teaching has changed over the years?
Increasingly, what's been quite heartening about not just how climate change is taught in academia, but also how it is communicated more widely with the public, with the business community, is it's really shifting from becoming this future issue to an issue of the present. It's something that is just being personally experienced now around the globe in ways that are much more impactful than was initially anticipated even just a few years ago. This shifting of climate from a future issue to a present issue is big, and that's definitely a piece of the change of how we teach climate that I think is making it much more engaging across a wide variety of students, and then they of course go into a wide variety of industries. Beyond academia is also expanding to who's really highlighting different elements of why we need to tackle climate change. You have the US military and the Pentagon now releasing reports about how climate change is the world's largest global security issue because of how it is exacerbating issues related to poverty, which in turn accelerates the probability of warfare and violence. I have a friend who's a Stanford professor, Marshall Burke, who's been publishing papers in Science and other places, basically drawing a direct link between the probability of civil war and crime rates and higher temperatures and resource constraints that already are coming to pass with climate change. And then of course you have the business community, and many of my students from my Stanford courses are also MBA students, and they are doing joint programs focused both on environmental science and MBA economics, et cetera. And so just the interdisciplinary nature of climate change intersecting almost every academic discipline is something that increasingly you're seeing throughout the university at Stanford, and as far as I've seen universities around the world, which I think is a very strong positive development.
You talked about research in climate change, and I have to believe this notion of big data could not be any more relevant than it is for you in climate change, because there's so much data out there. Talk us through how you approach this question of big data and why that approach might be relevant in business as well.
Big data is really what is driving both our understanding of climate change, our ability to have increasingly refined climate models that predict climate impacts with different scenarios down to the localized level as opposed to the global level. And actually what I'm more excited about is the ability for big data to really transfer to supply chain improvements. There's been a movement towards life cycle assessment data being incorporated into supply chains and making supply chains increasingly transparent and shifting towards real quantified sustainability improvements for supply chains as opposed to green marketing. When you combine that with information technology and social networking, social gaming, you can really create systems where that quantitative data is empowering us all to essentially vote with our wallets and our everyday decisions and enact our climate values. And that's a big trend, I think, that information technology is pushing right now, is bridging the gap that we essentially all have between what we say we care about, not just when it comes to climate change, but also when it comes to workers' rights and living wages and other environmental issues, pollutions, toxins, et cetera, money and politics, and then what we actually do. And the main reason there's that gap on a consumer level, and I think it's also true on a government level and business level, is just information and incentives haven't really been in the right places to close those gaps. And I think that's where big data is coming in, combined with social networks, gamification, if you want to call it that, really just pure comparison, to empower us all to vote with our wallets and really enact the world that we want to live in, not by voting for politicians once every few years, but just through our everyday lifestyle choices. And that empowers business that legitimately wants to be sustainable, which I think most businesses do. Virtually every large corporation now has an internal sustainability team, green team, whatever they call it. And in order for those teams to really be empowered, they need to demonstrate that they're, through being more sustainable, also improving the bottom line. If that life cycle information about supply chain sustainability is shifted all the way to the consumer decision-making level, then businesses that are being more sustainable are getting rewarded. And we're also seeing quantitative sustainability data when it comes to climate change as well as other sustainability metrics, making it into Wall Street, making it into financial decision-making. There's been a tremendous shift just in the last couple of years towards quantitative sustainability in finance and really optimizing financial products both for financial performance and for sustainability at the same time.
What role can businesses legitimately play in addressing the climate change issue?
The development of big data, sustainability, life cycle assessment databases that are out there is definitely a big benefit, not just for businesses to optimize their supply chains for energy efficiency and find low-hanging fruit when it relates to energy efficiency savings, but also ultimately to convey that knowledge to their customers. And that's increasingly being seen with apps like Good Guide that show social, environmental, health metrics as it relates to different consumer products and services. I think we're moving towards a world where quantified sustainability at a personal level based on our spending, investment, and lifestyle choices is something that's increasingly going to be automated, and that supply chain sustainability level for products and services, supply chain sustainability data will be something that really rewards companies that are doing things right and penalizes companies that are doing things wrong. And that's true on the consumer decision-making level to a certain extent already. I think with the ubiquity of smartphones, social networks, social gaming, peer comparisons, that's something that's going to be increasingly just becoming the norm, becoming the standard. Another area that I think it's fascinating to see quantitative sustainability spilling into is finance. And there's been a big shift towards divesting from fossil fuels. There's around $350 billion that are already committed to either divest from fossil fuels or at least track the quantitative greenhouse gas emissions associated with their investment portfolio. And that trend, I think, is only going to continue. And as that trend continues, you're increasingly going to see businesses that are being more sustainable actually being rewarded by the financial world with cheaper access to capital, and businesses that are dirtier, particularly the fossil fuel sector, is going to increasingly find it hard to get cheap capital.
For you, what are the most promising near or medium-term developments you see in addressing the climate change issue?
I think there are four big trends. There's using information communications technologies just to better our understanding of climate change impacts with better modeling. There's life cycle assessment data, and that data being used for businesses to improve supply chains and then being used by consumers to improve their everyday choices, their everyday decision making. And then the peer comparison is a big piece of what is driving us to engage more. There's also a trend towards just telling much more personalized stories about climate change. That's something that, just being able to post a YouTube video about why climate change matters to you, what solutions you see that you're really motivated by, and encouraging just conversations between our family and friends. And information technology can play a big role in that. And Yale project on climate communications is a fantastic resource that's really been diving into what actually motivates people to engage around climate change. And communication between family and friends, just those conversations about why climate change is important to me and how it can be solved, is the single most important driver of engagement. And information technology can really help accelerate those conversations and make sure that they are as engaging as possible based on who you're talking to. Knowing your audience is extraordinarily important. And then I'd say the final piece that's really exciting is information technology is really empowering finance to be much more quantitative in terms of optimizing investments both for climate performance and for financial return, and also other quantitative environmental, social, and governance metrics. So socially responsible investing is really increasingly becoming the mainstream. And if you look at what millennials expect with their investments, it's only going to become more so. And it's also something where financing clean technology projects is really being empowered by information technology. There's companies like Mosaic in the US and Sunfunder that are allowing crowd financing to fund renewable energy infrastructure. And the price of solar has gotten to the point that it's so low that it really pays back quite quickly. So you as an individual, through platforms like Sunfunder and Mosaic, can invest as little as $20 in a utility scale or commercial scale solar system, and you get that money paid back, and soon you'll actually be making substantial returns from that. The main challenge is accelerating those trends towards a workable climate solution for the planet, which is never going to be a silver bullet. But if we can get information and incentives in the right places, we can foster these virtuous cycles of sustainability at a personal level, at a business level, at a government level, where we're all trying to at least be as good as the average, be we individuals or be we businesses, comparing ourselves to our peers in our industry. And most of us want to be better than average. We all like to think we're better than average. And so if we're all actually trying to be better than average, and we can, for the first time, make the invisible visible, that we can see our climate footprint with information technology, which we'll never be able to do with our eyes. CO2 is invisible, and most of the CO2 emissions connected up to our lifestyle happen all over the world in our globalized supply chains. So the ability of information technology to make the invisible visible and to engage, inform, and engage even more towards actually driving personal sustainability, corporate sustainability, and national level government sustainability, I think will get us to a solution to climate change.
In terms of developing effective communication strategies for this agenda, the climate change agenda, what are some of the key principles for making effective communication?
So effective climate communications really need to be personal. It really needs to be a story that engages you. If you at a personal level are somebody that really cares about national security, global security, then the climate story that should be told to you should focus on the US military or other international security organizations that are highlighting the security elements of climate change, and that is a reason that you should engage. And if you're somebody who's motivated by social justice issues, by poverty, highlighting those aspects of climate change. Certainly if you're motivated by environmental issues, that's an area where climate change has already been marketed relatively successfully. But the first step is using communications to get the public to engage with climate change and care about climate change. And if you look at international polling data from Pew Research Center and others, actually Stanford University and New York Times just did a poll in the US finding that the vast majority of Americans, 83%, say that climate change is a serious issue. And so the bigger problem is how do we bridge that gap between saying climate change is a big problem and then actually do something about it. And that's where information technology, getting into the quantitative climate and other sustainability of our decision making in terms of spending, investment, and lifestyle choices is going to be pushing virtuous cycles of continuous improvement on a personal level, and then I think also virtuous cycles of continuous improvement on a business level and even a government level. And the ubiquity of Facebook and other social networking services makes it really easy to link up with all our friends and see how our climate footprint compares with our friends. That's a big piece of what we're doing with OroEco, is empowering that comparison. And if you look at the behavioral psychology that's out there, that is the single most important thing in motivating our decision making. It's not saving money. What we are motivated by as humans, more than anything else, is how we feel we're evaluated and respected by our peers. And this is true across cultures, it's true across economic groups. We care what our friends think. We care what our family thinks. Maybe we care about what society more broadly thinks. And whoever we define as our peer group is up to us, but how we're respected and perceived by our peer group is extraordinarily important to us. And money is just one indicator of that. For some of us, it's more important than others, but that is ultimately what it's driving at. And so information technology is this amazing tool to communicate that really directly now. And then there's direct incentives as well. There's virtual currencies that are developing around sustainability, like the PIPS Rewards platform, which is something we're integrating into OroEco. There's other services like Recycle Bank in the US who are finding traction and basically rewarding all their users for recycling more. So there are tangible real-world benefits that are getting connected up to quantitative sustainability and just public engagement and, more importantly, public action around climate. And I think the more that happens, the more there's going to be pressure and, let's say, empowerment, because pressure is kind of a negative word, for business to continuously improve and really communicate those quantitative sustainability improvements to all their customers. And so I'm fundamentally optimistic. I think people as a whole really do want to live in a sustainable world, not just in relation to climate change, but in relation to all other environmental and social issues and getting rid of money in politics and corruption. So it's really about just getting information and incentives in the right places to create the world that we want to live in, and I'm extraordinarily bullish on the idea of information technology getting us there. It needs a lot of help, but it is going to get us there.